Don't listen to the others. This is a game of the year.
Devil May Cry 2. Your curiosity is not worth your sanity. Don't play
No way, a horrible game. Devil May Cry 2 is a true
The
amazement.
best part about Devil May Cry was the combat. The worst part about Devil May Cry 2 is the
worst Devil May
combat.
Cry I've ever
Best video
played.
game in the Devil May Cry saga. It is only surpassed by Devil May Cry 1, Devil May Cry 3, Devil May Cry 4, Devil May Cry 5, and Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. Okay. I'm not going to tell you Devil May Cry 2 is bad. It's not my place to say that. Because who am I to tell you what's good or bad? As I've grown older and somewhat matured, a revelation dawned on me. Oh, give me a second. There's something. A revelation dawned on me. Just because I think something is bad or not good or whatever, doesn't mean that it has no merit or significance to somebody else who enjoyed it. At the risk of introducing political subjects in a video game topic, allow me to pitch you a couple of questions. Are mixed drinks better than neat drinks? Not an adult or a fan of alcoholic beverages? How about this question? Does pineapple belong on pizza? Answer any of those questions by yelling at me through your screen. Because I know you have an opinion on pineapple on pizza. Oh? Huh. Intriguing. Hadn't considered that perspective. You done? Because 41-year-old DMA says that even though bourbon on the rocks is his preferred drink of choice, an appletini is perfectly valid. The best drink is the drink that you enjoy. Pineapple does belong on pizza for the person who enjoys pineapple on their pizza. Just because I don't appreciate and understand the things that you enjoy doesn't mean that I gotta bash you for it and make you feel bad about it. Context is everything. Why would someone prefer Pepsi over Coca-Cola? The region they grew up in has a lot to do with their alliances, due to marketing strategies. A kid growing up hunting deer with their father, who learned the values of living off the land, versus one who randomly came across video footage of a slaughterhouse, vowing to be a vegetarian for life. PlayStation versus Xbox. Cat people, dog people. Apple, Android. We make decisions based off of context. It is everything. We are victims of the ramifications of our environment. There is no best, there's no worst, there's no anything. Just what is right and good for that one person. Context is everything. Here's why I don't like Devil May Cry 2. Imagine waiting 2 years for a follow-up to one of the best action games. As a young 20-year-old, the hype behind Devil May Cry 2's release was boiling over. You get to EB Games, slap your hard-earned money on the counter, and buy the sequel on day one. You make the 15-minute drive back home, pop the game in your PS2, and this is how the game greets you. We're off to a good start. We're off to a good start, and this is where I spoil everything. That was the coolest part in the entire game. The entire game. It's kind of funny that the developers were like, you know what? Let's just get the cool part out of the way so that way we don't burden the player with any more cool parts. But let's continue living in ignorance, shall we?
In a time long since past, in an age of darkness, when the earth was overrun with demons.
As I'm editing this is literally the first time I've noticed the Munda statue.
Humanity's hope lived in a demon named Sparda, with a spirit unlike any other, and wielding the sword that bore his own name, Sparda eradicated the demons. And now, the legend of Sparda has been inherited by his son, the demon slayer, Dante.
You called?
Casual Dante, making an entrance all badass-like, dropping through a glass ceiling, one-shotting bad guys on his way down, and just landing all nonchalant and saying, "Sup? Okay, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. And this is going to be good." Lines from a book? Maybe prophetic? Nice touch. Now, let's get started. Dante on a tower. Not gonna ask why or how Dante got up there, but he found his point of interest. Good thing he's good at reading dagger-etched maps. Now let's go Marshawn Lynch home a deek! Yeah. Pause. Let's compare Stinger from Devil May Cry 1. Clean, strong animation. Thunderous sound effect. Subtle cameras... Excuse me. Subtle camera tremble to match the audio. Acceptable voice acting. Okay, let's look at Devil May Cry 3's Stinger. Same animation style of Devil May Cry 1. A greater emphasis on the sword sound effect and effective camera study. Powerful voice acting. On to Devil May Cry 4. Kept the clean animation, appropriate tweaks to the sound effects and voice acting, colorful spark to supplement the camera tremble. Cool, alright, great. Devil May Cry 5. Great animation still. The sound of Dante's body moving through the air is a wonderful touch. Assertive voice acting with a lower timbre, minimal camera influence, and since it's there, let's look at the reboot Stinger. Southpaw. Interesting. Still, good animation with streak visuals, no camera trembling, and the sound design is... it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, Devil May Cry 2 Stinger looks more, shall we say, human-like? It's not stiff, it's fluid. We get a lunge motion and less of a manga-like dash. It's absolutely detached from the camera. We get a weak grunt from the voice actor. The animation concludes nicely with the arm swinging around his head to place Rebellion on his back. It's an efficient motion in reality. Now, the others have this pendulum sort of motion at the elbow that implies carelessness to the body when the animation ends. The dashing animation is very rigid and stiff. But the thing is, it fits the character. I know that starting out with Stinger seems like a weird thing to focus on, because there is so much to be curious about. The automatic gun juggling mechanics, the clumsy rolling command that causes Dante to wall run in an erroneous manner, the weird enemy names, random key drops, Dante's personality, which, by the way, was crafted based off of the decision off of one particular person in the team. And before I go into that any further, let's do a deeper comparison between Devil May Cry 1 and 2. Any Devil May Cry fan knows how the game actually started out as Resident Evil 4. The pivot from Resident Evil into Devil May Cry took place when Resident Evil creator and director Shinji Mikami and other, quote, higher-ups looked at the build and said, "This isn't Resident Evil." So they decided to rework what was already done and repackage it into a new IP. And we all know what that IP is. Say it with me, people. Carnival. That was the original working title for the game. At least, that's what I was told based off of research off of this book. I bought the Devil May Cry 3142 graphic arts book recently. As a Devil May Cry fan, I found some pretty cool things about the lesser known details of the first 4 games. I'll be citing interviews from this book, since it does provide some legitimately cool details about some of the development of these games. And one of the big takeaways from this book was how obsessed Devil May Cry 1 developers Team Little Devils was about not only getting things right, but how director Hideki Kamiya was open to any ideas from anybody in the team, regardless if they were asked about them or not. So, DMC didn't allow jumping initially? There was only a short time between the game becoming Carnival and Dante being given a sword, and we did argue about whether or not he should be able to jump. I'm not sure why, but Kamiya-san was very much against jumping. We eventually wore him down with the argument that a 3D game with so much action simply had to include the ability to jump. He relented in the end, albeit bitterly. Maybe he was thinking about how much extra work it would add. No way. But once it was decided, Kamiya-san's mood picked up. After jumping was implemented, he didn't hold back, exclaiming, "How about a double jump?" The stage designers weren't so pleased. "We didn't build these stages to be viewed from such a high perspective," they said. But they did their best to adjust everything, only to be blindsided again by the introduction of the flying devil trigger mode. We were on the sidelines of all of this, but I felt bad for the stage designers, who went from stages designed for no jumping to double jumping, and finally devil trigger mode flying. Surprised by the initial lack of jumping mechanics? The story behind High Time is kinda wild. The software guys were the worst. They take our discarded motions and make them into new moves. Like, you know, how holding down the button during High Time makes you leap into the air? They just went and decided that on their own. Kamiya-san saw one of their pictures of Dante striking a pose on the ground before shooting into the air, loved it, gave them the green light, and then told me to redo the whole pose, saying, "Hey Hiraki-kun, make the motion look like this." We have details of adjustments made to the camera system that originally had no jumping mechanics, having to include air hike and air raid. That was a team decision, even if Kamiya was pressured into agreeing to it, and rising High Time was something that unexpectedly happened because some random dudes was toying around with trash? How incredible is that? The care that went into Devil May Cry 1 is obvious. The iconic introduction of Alistair, Dante engulfed in flames as he tames the Ifrit gauntlets. Hell, even switching firearms showcases a pretty cool animation touch. And while the storytelling isn't great, we understand what's happening. Demon Daddy fights all the demons to save humanity. Random lady attacks Dante, tells Dante she's actually cool. Bad guy makes his grand reappearance at an island. Other bad guys with ties to Dante's father shows up. Other stuff happens. You kill your brother. Mysterious goo boss. Turns out mommy chick isn't cool. Fight big boss. Trish gives you a helping hand. Now you have a lifelong business partner. I might be oversimplifying the story. I'm not. But there are ties to these characters and bosses. They're loose ties, but the tethers are there. And speaking of tethers, is it important to know why the marionettes are swarming the island? I guess it's about as important as the backstory of the first Goomba you come across in Super Mario Bros. Maybe not, but what is important is enemy design. We have different colors of marionettes that correlates to health. Some have blades they can throw, some have shotguns, they can latch onto you to stab Dante. They can even use their blade weapons to block attacks. Goomba touches you, you die. In 1985 context, that's plenty. So I can excuse why Devil May Cry 2's Agonophinis lack context to the game, or the Puya, or the Sira? What does bother me about the enemies, especially in the first level, is how they appear just because. What are the intentions of these enemies in terms of gameplay? These birds? Okay, you should shoot them. Abandon melee methods and have at it. But the addition of Mysterious? Add nothing to the mission. In fact, they should have been the first enemies because they're significantly less dangerous than the Argonofini. And that's saying a lot. Devil May Cry 1's first mission is nothing but marionettes. Again, we have variables through color and weapon variety, but we don't deviate from this one enemy. It speaks a lot about how the enemy design in Devil May Cry 1 can be pleasing to the eye and can project their threat level with their arsenal and colors. Devil May Cry 2's first mission has 3 different enemies, and they do nothing to teach us about the game's combat other than spam your guns and watch them float. A lot about the game feels lazy. One of my favorite facepalm moments takes place in the menu, when you're looking at your equipment. When you select Ebony and Ivory, they're not actually mentioned by name, only as handguns. Not only did they not bother to name them properly, Ivory doesn't even have a trigger guard. Ebony does. And the redundant image of Ebony and Ivory, excuse me, the handguns. Ivory has a trigger guard. Not having unlockables or purchase weapon skills was also infuriating. Having access to Stinger from the very start was great, I guess. Not having unique skills and traits for Rebellion also made the weapons seem very empty. Hell, the in-game description of Rebellion it's just a standard sword. Compelling. When you realize there are other swords that also have no additional perks, other than length and strength, melee was just a boring and lazy chore. The generic animation of acquiring amulets also screams laziness. I mean, look at this. No variation or even a change in Dante's Devil Trigger. I get recycling animations for efficiency, but context. The truth about Devil May Cry 2's development is, for a 22-year-old game, the initial development isn't very clear. The biggest unknown is who the first director of Devil May Cry 2 actually was. Ultimately, I don't think it's that important of a detail, but having gone 22 years without knowing is kinda weird. It kinda makes sense if you understand Japanese culture, but that's a whole other subject I'm not going to get into in this video. All we know about this director is he was a planner for Capcom Studio 1, and that person approached Devil May Cry 1 director Hideki Kamiya to review and look at Devil May Cry design documents. That is how Kamiya found out that he wasn't going to direct the sequel. This director was also popping his director cherry with Devil May Cry 2. That level of inexperience and lack of guidance explains a lot about the game in general. Another detail about Devil May Cry 2's development involves director Itsuno's introduction to the game. He came to replace the unnamed first director 6 months before the game's launch, and he had a lot of work to do. While the team had some work to show for their development, Itsuno walked into this project where Dante had one animation completed. Just one. You wanna guess what animation it was? It was Stinger. It was Stinger. That was the only thing that they had completed for Dante with his animation. Now, I had no idea that Stinger was the only animation that they had finished up when Itsuno walked in. I had decided on the title of this video long before that, purely coincidence. Now that I think about it, it could explain why Stinger lost its launcher functionality, because nobody considered looking at the Devil May Cry 1 source material. Given that context, it's no wonder everything fell off with the game. The recycled animation when acquiring new amulets, the boring secret mission and bloody palace room environments, the lack of Rebellion's backstory and significance, not having combat variety between different melee weapons. Itsuno, as the new director, had 6 months and no real plan on how to wrap up what was very much a non-existent game into a playable one. It's not fair for Itsuno, but it's a miracle Devil May Cry 2 became a finished product. And to his credit, Itsuno asked that he immediately take the director role for Devil May Cry 3, so his name wouldn't only be linked to Devil May Cry 2. And I will give the game some credit. One of its best strengths is the gunplay. Yeah, we like to bash how overpowered the guns were and how they rendered melee attacks useless, but they did some pretty slick things to expand on it. Rainstorm looks objectively cool, even if it has no practical use. I would say it was implemented to encourage players to not button mash, but the melee and gun mechanics have no opinions on button mashing. It's visually nice, just had a bad application. Twosome time is a great method to keep your rear covered. The secondary target gets knocked back and you're kept safe. And being able to use twosome time while holding the shotgun is a wonderful touch. And I love being able to use a single pistol while in the air and holding the rocket launcher. Love it. And, of course, switching guns on the fly. On top of that, having a dedicated roll button was nice. Not 100% functional, but nice. Having the roll button and the expansion of gunplay mechanics, it's easy to see how this game influenced the style system in Devil May Cry 3. Would Devil May Cry 3 have been a thing if it weren't for the small handful of positives from Devil May Cry 2? It's kind of hard to say. Clarification of the development of Devil May Cry 2 reveals a lot. Looking back at the game's fundamentals, like the visuals and the overall designs, we didn't take the part of Devil May Cry 1 that the players really loved into account well enough, so the second game felt very artificial. I think our attitude was a little too much, we're going to make it how we want to. There wasn't enough recognition of the fact that 2 was only happening because of the success of 1. This understanding provides so much clarity for why Devil May Cry 2's tone, feel, and aesthetics aren't at all familiar to the brand. When a sequel is made, there are some characteristics and elements that makes the transition into the new product. In regards to video games, it could be the animation, skill lists, combat mechanics, and characters. Not every sequel follows these trends. I mean, look at Final Fantasy. But how is that going to be possible when we're doing things how we want is the motivation of the creation of a sequel? An argument can be made that Devil May Cry 2 was a success. It sold over 1 million copies, but only because fans of the original knew it was going to be good. How could they butcher someone as cool as Dante? Well, there's more to that quote. Dante's sudden change into a more taciturn character was the producer's decision. Because he didn't like the jail-cracking, wise-ass Dante from 1. The team agreed, and that was the direction we went in. Funny how a team can magically create the rising high time function and implement jumping mechanics in a game and also destroy a character. it is a double-edged sword. So, who is this producer? You guessed it. Frank Stallone. Tsuyoshi Tanaka. Tsuyoshi Tanaka. And I hear you asking, what other contributions did he make to the game? The hidden costumes in DMC2 were part of a collaboration with Diesel, right? That was because Tanaka-san, the producer, used to work for them. It was a collaboration that made good use of his last job. At least I understand why they got involved in the game, I guess. It's dumb. Along with his reason for Lucia's involvement with the game. Speaking of the little ass, how does Lucia fit into the story? She's a protector. The girl was raised by people who fought demons way back in the past. Who she protects exactly is a mystery though. Why even bother having this character? Does your game need more TNA? I know 19-year-old DMA would have been high-fiving himself when he read that. That's why I look so disappointed. Sort of. Ahem. A lot of people weren't pleased that you couldn't play as Trish in Devil May Cry. Lucia's here to appease them. Well, at least most of the outspoken of crowd. Plus, we wanted to give Dante a James Bond-like appeal and have a different female lead to play alongside in each new game. The secondary character didn't really have to be female, but a lot of folks thought it would be a good way to balance the selection. I happen to agree with them. One of the complaints about Devil May Cry 1, supposedly, is a lack of a playable Trish. That's the inspiration for Lucia. Okay, fine, sure, whatever. Except Trish is a playable character in Devil May Cry 2. Familiar moveset, the time-based combat, even has the Sparta sword. Okay, sweet, great. So why is Lucia in the game? Because of James Bond? Okay, fine. Trish is here. That means Devil May Cry 1's superior mechanics will rescue us from Devil May Cry 2's analog stick-based combat, making this a better game and an overall better experience, right? Well, this is where I'm going to have to default on my memories of Trish years and years and years ago. Because in order for you to unlock Trish, you have to complete Dante's hard mode, which isn't made available until you complete both Dante's and Lucia's normal campaigns. And I'm not going to play 2 more campaigns in Devil May Cry 2 only to be rewarded with being able to record more Devil May Cry 2 footage. I'm just not going to do that. But the short answer to that is no. Trish does not make this a better game. You still have to fight boring enemies. You still have to fight boring bosses. Better combat does not elevate bad enemy design to an acceptable level. It's just that simple. I am a believer that gameplay is the #1 element of a video game. Visuals are nice, but great graphics can make a mediocre game feel super shallow. Online connectivity isn't crucial for me, since... excuse me. Online connectivity isn't crucial for me, since I'm an introvert. So, I'm good. Storylines? As I grow older, I have a greater appreciation for good storytelling. Horizon Zero Dawn still has me shook. Zero Dawn's plot twist, in my opinion, is the single greatest plot twist I have ever come across in all of entertainment. But on the other hand, I am a fan of Devil May Cry 1, and it's why I became a gamer, so... I'm 41, about to hit 42 soon. The Devil May Cry series is always going to have a very special place in my heart. It's been with me for over half of my life. Oh man, that Oh, that... Oh, it's been with me for over half of my life. And like any relationship, it's going to have its ups, it's going to have its downs, and it's going to have its questionable periods. Part of growth is acknowledging your mistakes and flaws. At least that's the first step. You can either learn from these mistakes and apply lessons learned moving forward, double down on these flaws and establish them as unique characteristics, or even do nothing about them. As far as Devil May Cry 2 is concerned, I don't have to like it. But I do appreciate it for what it is. And for me, it serves as a launching point into Devil May Cry 3 in terms of gameplay and mechanics and innovation. Now, Devil May Cry 2 fans will say the influence that it has on 3 is the reason why it's a great game, but let's face it. If 2 killed the franchise and 3 never happened, 2 would look infinitely worse than it already does. So while I don't agree that 2 is a good game as a standalone title or as a Devil May Cry game, you know, at least we can all agree that pizza is incredible, regardless of Pineapple's involvement. Oh, finally, done with this video. Who would have thought a Devil May Cry 2 video was going to take a lot longer than expected? But could finally get to that Devil May Cry anime. Been holding out on it for a while. It'll be good to finally get some time to watch it and enjoy it. Oh, come on! You know what? At least we can all agree that pizza is good, regardless of Pineapple's involvement.